Then let's look at the future for just a little bit. Let's start with 2026. If you can believe it, we are less than a year away from the midterms. Who's better positioned for those elections, Democrats or Republicans?
And Brittany, Democrats right now are better positioned. So right now we have them at 44% in the generic congressional ballot versus 42% for Republicans with 15% undecided. Now, I will say I am a little bit surprised that it's not higher for Democrats in this, given that this was such a poor result for President Trump in his approval ratings and his grades. I would have expected that would have for that to translate to more success for Democrats on that generic congressional ballot, but we just aren't seeing it quite yet. I think that next year we're going to start moving into a likely voter universe. So things will change a little bit, and that might end up boosting Democrats a little bit in that generic ballot. Right now, I think the one highlight is that independents are breaking for Democrats by 40% to 32% for Republicans. But right now, we are not seeing that movement towards Democrats like we even saw in 2025 elections. But I do think that that will probably pick up steam as we head into 2026.
And when you're looking at undecideds, I know that we're just about a year away, but how many are there, and does that really matter just yet?
Yeah, they're 15%, and I do think that that's reasonably high. Even though we have a year to go, I think that folks mostly know who they're leaning towards supporting, even now, just given how much partisanship matters at this point in U.S. politics. But yeah, I think that they definitely matter, and I think that there's a lot of runway here. But I think that as we get into the campaign cycle, we're going to see some of these folks breaking. And again, we are going to be moving to a likely voter universe, and that will change this. And I think it'll naturally bring down some of that undecided factor.
And now let's look at 2028 because you asked voters a really interesting question: what type of candidate they would hypothetically support in the next presidential election. And you divided it in four camps: a progressive Democrat candidate, a moderate Democrat, a MAGA Republican, or a moderate Republican. And you found that by and large, voters mostly want a more moderate candidate. Talk to us about what you found.
Yeah, Brittany. So we matched these hypothetical presidential candidates together to see on the ideology spectrum who would do better. So the first matchup is a progressive Democrat versus a MAGA Republican. And we see that they're very close to tied. So 43% for the progressive candidate versus 42% for the MAGA Republican. We next tried a progressive Democrat versus a moderate Republican. And we find that a progressive does significantly worse than a moderate Republican, 36% versus 48%. A moderate Democrat, 47% versus a MAGA Republican, 38%. And then a moderate Democrat versus a moderate Republican. That is a little bit interesting. There we see 39% break for the Democrat versus 44% for the Republican. So as you said, moderates fare better here. And I think that that does come down to folks believing that they are more moderate than they might not necessarily be. And the just general appeal of wanting to support someone who's a little bit more towards the center, who wants to work across the aisle. But I think that this would change pretty significantly once we attach names to these candidates. And I think that it will change significantly once we get to 2028 and some of these candidates do have names. But it is interesting to see, and moderates certainly seem to fare better. And that is largely driven by independent voters here.
And then when you look at everything that happened this year, some good, some bad, there was certainly a lot of news. I mean, the news cycle was moving so fast this year. When people reflect on 2025 and they're looking ahead towards 2026, do they think that next year is going to be better than this past one?
So the good news is they do. 52%, so a slim majority, say that they think 2026 will be better than 2025. I think that that's good news for everyone. It seems like folks are not in a very happy mood at the end of 2025. There have been some issues that have continued throughout the course of the year. We've not seen them drop on our issues testing or as you saw in Trump's grades. Folks don't necessarily feel great about the year, but they're positive about the year ahead. And that's especially true of folks who are under the age of 30. 69% of those voters say that 2026 is going to be better than 2025. I'm right with them. Hopefully that's true.
Well, I love that. I mean, I'm glad that people are ending this year at least on a more optimistic note. And Matt Taglia, thank you for joining me all throughout this year to talk to us about the numbers, break down Emerson's polls. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can have many more next year.
Yep. Thank you, Brittany. See you in 2026.